Last question, which brings together Joe's Garage and Roxy. We were talking about new releases from more Roxy, more releases, and I also read that Joe's Garage was performed as a theater piece in 2008, somewhere, I think in Los Angeles, and also as a musical kind of thing in 1999 with, I think, Ray White or Ike Willis in playing Joe. I'm not sure whether I read it correctly. So all these things that happened after the original releases, what is your opinion about that? I mean, I know it a bit because we talked about it, but I thought about it as well, and it convinced me. So first the translation.
It's again one of those records where the musicianship is, I think, very. It's one of the bands that had all of those great elements. You know, there's again the funkiness, but there's the recording, the sound of the recording, and I think it's the combination of the textures. There's orchestral style textures that happen, but there's synthesizers. There's a little bit of acoustic guitar. There's flavors that aren't on some of the other records, and I think that every record he tried to just start from a blank piece of paper and make something that sounded totally different. You really can't go from album to album and say, oh, this one sounds exactly like that. Where some other bands, it's expected that their albums will sound similar. But, so I think, you know, this one hit on a particular kind of feel and a combination of sounds that was very appealing, but it also is some of his best guitar playing again, you know. So I think it's one more reason why it's a fan favorite.
Interesting was
appreciate the music because they're listening to it and they're not necessarily thinking about the lyrics as much. They're into the music and they know a lot more of the instrumental music and stuff like that. So the reactions are different based on the fact that some of these things are pretty familiar to them, you know, whereas in the US, people tend to really focus mostly on lyrical stuff. And a lot of times, just as it is and with the podcast and other things, it's hard to create, if I'm playing a show, it's hard to create a set list that can give people a broad overview of the music. Because when I started, my goal was to re-educate people, younger generations who never got to see the music, because I thought that the stuff that my dad was posthumously being, the story that was being told about him was not accurate to what he did. You know, people were referring to him as basically comedy music and like a novelty act. So people didn't know about him as a composer, as a guitar player, an arranger, you know, all of this stuff. So I wanted to do something that brought more of that to the forefront and de-emphasize anything that was the comedy stuff. But I've been doing it now for almost 15 years, so some of the comedy stuff has certainly come into what we do, but in the early years of doing it, I wanted to not do that because specifically so that, you know, people could hear more of the other stuff and just be more familiar with it.
Okay. I asked that question because we will see now Thomas Schütte's film. It's a film of a European film editor. In that question, the film is 3 years old, 2016 it came out. It had several prizes on special festivals. And we show the film now also to complete the, let's say, the tableau, the Frank Zappa, not only as a musician, but also as a figure with a very important attitude to society, to modern society of today. Of course, of today, the last 24 years, it's now 24 years far away. But I think this movie now will complete the first evening, and we come back then also for Q&A with the audience. Thank you very much for the first time. Thank you.
All right, enjoy the film. I think, that song also, because it was so popular in places like Scandinavia, it was really a song that people liked the feeling of the song, and it was like a date song. People would slow dance or roller skate to that song. And it's preposterous if you tried to put that in the context of people doing that in America. That would never happen with that song because they'd be so offended by the lyrics. But now, I think the lyrics pertain to a lot of the things that are happening in the U.S. with the Me Too movement and people like Brett Kavanaugh being in the Supreme Court. That song sounds like that guy to me.
Well, as a big Zappa fan, I think I'm a bit worried about the fact what might have gone missed, in all that on master tapes that we miss out,
Yeah, some of those tapes still bear the scars of having been sitting in the sewage. If you look at the paper on the outside, you still see the marks. It's disgusting.
And then afterwards about Roxy and Elsewhere. And I'm going to ask you the same question for each album I'm asking, which is, why Joe's Garage is an album that you would consider as being ahead of its time?
Well, the Joe's Garage record, for me, there's a few different reasons, but I think, first of all, I think it's one of the best recorded albums of all time. The actual sound of the album is, to me, it just sounds fantastic. All the detail, the guitar sounds, everything on that record is also part of something that was a story that my dad wanted to tell as a whole piece, so a concept album. So we can get into that a little bit. I guess I'll let some of this be translated.
Also wir haben zunächst mal Joe's Garage und dann Roxy and Elsewhere ausgesucht, und ich möchte jetzt zu jedem der Alben eigentlich die gleiche Frage stellen, nämlich warum ist dieses Album seiner Zeit voraus? Und die Antwort oder der erste Teil der Antwort ist jetzt erstmal zu Joe's Garage. Da gibt es sicherlich verschiedene Gründe, warum das Album seiner Zeit voraus war, aber für mich muss ich einfach sagen, es ist eine der besten Aufnahmen aller Zeiten, einfach der Sound und die Details und die Gitarrensounds, die sind einfach einzigartig. Und dazu kommt noch, dass das Album eben eine Geschichte erzählt. Mein Vater wollte ja eine Geschichte erzählen, also im Sinne eines Konzeptalbums, und ich denke, darüber werden wir noch ein bisschen mehr hören jetzt.
So to continue, the story, as most of you are familiar, is that in the future music is illegal. And I think there were a lot of people in Eastern Europe that actually had that real experience. And my dad's music was something for them that got them through tough times. So the song, the album has a bit of a sense of humor to it, which, some of my dad's records have. But at this point in time, it's almost like some of this stuff is coming back around, and it's like real again, where people don't value music anymore, and it's just, I guess it's complicated for me to say stuff and then have it be translated. I have to wait.
Just one more little question, or maybe two questions about the album and the concept of Joe's Garage 1, 2, and 3. As I remember, I was basically socialized with Frank's music with one size fits all, which we're talking about in the next set.
Sure.
So a lot of my friends said when Joe's Garage came out, hey, this is not Frank anymore, this is not the Mothers, this is something completely different. I don't like it. It's too commercial. Something like that, I heard. And it actually was in popularity, at least in the hardcore fan base, something in the 80s when it came out, end of the 70s, that had it difficult, at least what I hear from the hardcore Zappa fans. How was it the same in the US, or how would you describe such a strange way of approaching a new album?
Well, I think it's. Are we waiting for her to translate your?
I'll translate.
Wollen Sie, genau.
Also noch zwei Fragen vielleicht zu diesem Album und dem Konzeptalbum Joe's Garage, Akt 1, 2 und 3. Also ich wurde eigentlich sozialisiert mit One Size Fits All, dem Album, über das wir nachher noch sprechen werden. Aber viele meiner Freunde, die haben damals gesagt, als Joe's Garage rauskam, die haben gesagt, das ist nicht mehr Frank Zappa, wie wir ihn kennen, das ist nicht mehr Mothers of Invention, das ist alles viel zu kommerziell. Und ich denke, es war deshalb vielleicht auch bei diesen Hardcore-Zappa-Fans nicht so beliebt in den 70er und 80er Jahren. Die Frage ist, war das in den USA genauso? Und was sagen Sie zu diesem Ansatz?
I think when it came out, it was popular because it had a lot of vocals on it, and typically people really listen to vocals more than instrumental stuff. It somehow turns out that way, but because it had such nice sounding vocals, but yet the content was not super commercial. I think that was an interesting way to present the material, though, because it's got a lot of very good melodic content, but then he's talking about things like having sex with vacuum cleaners.
Yes.
So, you have things in there that other people wouldn't be singing about or spending their time even thinking about putting to music.
Yes.
But that's one of the things that I always was amazed at in my dad's music, is that he would write really amazing music and then sometimes put lyrics that for some people might think that would destroy the good part of the music, but he loved having it operate on two levels, where it was like stupid and clever at the same time.
That's a topic that we could elaborate, I think, for hours. Exactly that.
Yeah.
Thank you for this part, and let's get some Roxy.
All right. And one more thing, just because it's sort of on topic, is that there are releases that have come out since my father has passed away, and some of them are very good, and some of them are not very good. In my opinion, I have nothing to do with what the Zappa Family Trust puts out. But one of the things that I would just like to present to you is that there are things that were sitting in the vault that never came out because my dad probably didn't want them to. Like if you're an artist, you have a certain sense of what you want people to hear, what you think is your finished best work. And so at times, maybe fans that really want to hear as much as they possibly can, they might be thrilled to hear things, but my point is that maybe not all of it is stuff that my dad would have wanted to come out. So, now, I don't know anything about the show that may or may not have had Ike or Ray, so I can't really comment on that. I did see the other production that was put on in Los Angeles. I had nothing to do with it. It was not my favorite. But the thing is, when it comes to my dad's music, I kind of look at it like this. He had a phrase that you might be familiar with. He said, "You got to put the eyebrows on it," which, that's that raise your eyebrow, like, what is going on here? Why would somebody do this? And, something that makes it different than. He had a very good sense of what that meant to him, and so when people interpret the music, I first like to think about it like classical music, in that if it's on the page, those are the instructions. And so sometimes people
think that if you're going to play somebody else's music, you're supposed to change it a whole lot because otherwise, you're just copying it. But listen to what an orchestra does. They're playing the music that's on the page because it was written that way. So there's two different ways to think about the stuff, and sometimes both work very well. But my dad would have been the final arbiter of taste if a show was actually made for the Joe's Garage thing, and the version that was made, personally, knowing him, I don't think he would have liked it. But translation.
The duel, again, like the spider and the chicken yesterday, or something like that. Shall we switch to Roxy? Sure. Okay. The second album, and we will hear some songs from Roxy and Elsewhere. Roxy and Elsewhere, an album that also the same question. Why is that, in your opinion, an album that was ahead of its time? Okay.